So with procedural level generation, if I hit this and I simulate, it creates, right now I have a 10 by 10 of an environment that generates something different every time I go into it. And what causes this is, never begins, it goes through two loops. One is for row, and the other is for column. And using the level grid size, you can, what I had is a 10 by 10, but you can make it 15 by 20, or if you make them different variables, you can have row by column, and they each go through these numbers to determine the location. And you get that, because when you originally make it, it does this, but you can right click this and split to struct pin, and you get that. What it does is it goes through each one of those and creates an instance, and it chooses which instance from an array of available level names. And you have to put each one in, and it has to be the same as that, and it just gets a random one within the length of your array. Then it creates an instance of that, and then it decides where that instance will be placed based on your math, which is based on the loops as well. And then each instance also can have a name based on the, in this case it's row, and then X, and then column, and that's how you get the name of each instance. And you also have to make sure it's loaded and visible, and that's all you need to be able to let up a square. And then this map, I have my other two tutorial works. Another one is also procedural generation, but this one is for models. For example, you can see it changes things, and because I have not that one, it is random bushes. This is the blueprint that has it. It's a construction script, because as you can see, this is just a kind of a placeholder mesh, but these are bushes. That's because the add static mesh component, you choose the mesh over here. For example, you can make this a whole bunch of chairs and other chairs. Let's change it back to bushes, they just look better. And you choose how to do that with use of these two variables. This one I named how many bushes, this was the modifier. You can see they have these little eyes. By making them instance editable, they show up over here, which will allow people that don't want to go into the coding to do what they need to do with it. They just want to drag it out here and mess with it this way. They select the instance and simply say, I need 15 bushes, and let's make it a 500 radius. So I got 15 bushes, and they'll randomly generate in that little area. And if you make, oh, that was one too many zeros. So we'll get 15 bushes in a much larger radius that way. And it gives people a way to manipulate it without going in here and changing numbers like that. You do that with the random unit, that's what causes it to disperse randomly. And you times it by that, which allows you to get a larger area to cover. We break the vector because if you do the Z, then you'll also end up getting it up and down like that. We don't want the transform for X and Z, and then it just places one of these based on however many you want in this random area. With the last tutorial I watched was saving and loading. Well, actually, the tutorial I watched was just saving. I added the loading part. I also added it as event dispatchers. So in this one, we have event dispatcher for when K is pressed, it saves the game. When L is pressed, it loads the game. As well, you notice this is I'm not sure what to call it, a subclass of the save game class called my save game. The only thing in here is variables. In this particular case, just player transform. And when the game begins, it will cast a first person to see if like K or L are pressed, because then it decides which event is being dispatched to. The save game, if you hit K, it will ask, does the save game already exist? And in this particular case, I only want one save, so I just need to solve these, but you can have more if you work with that. But the very first time you hit the button, no save game is going to exist. So you need branch, and if there's no save game, then it needs to create a save game object under the class of the one that has the variables you need. And then you cast to that one. And you can notice you have player transform here, but it's not here. That's because it's getting this one from that, and it's affecting that one. That's what the cast allows you to do. And then you also save the game to the slot. And in this case, I added a print string so it can be seen when I hit the button, when I hit K or L. And then if a save already exists, then it does the exact same thing, with the difference being load game from slot instead of create save game object. And then the load game, you hit L. I have it so it will ask if a save game exists, because if no save game exists, you can't load the save game. So if it exists, then it will load the game from slot, which allows you to cast to it and get the player transform that was set, and it sets that actor to the transform to the location that you had it set to when you hit the save key. And then it loads that, and it'll transport you there. One thing to note is that it only loads the information you put into it. For example, let's shoot this a bunch. That's a lot louder than I want it to be, but oh well. So that's been moved, and then I hit location saved over here. Then I walk over here, then I load it. I'm over here, but these blocks are exactly as they were before. Because their position wasn't saved, loading it doesn't actually do anything. If I wanted to, I'd have to actually like save the information from them, or perhaps there's another method that this particular method doesn't cover. This just saves the variables that you choose to save. And that's all. I've got two procedurally generated things. One is level streaming, where the other is something that a designer can use to just drag out and place like for lunch bushes in a more random pattern rather than placing each and every one of them. This will place them in a different pattern each time, and as well as saving and loading variables from a save game.